I wasn't drinking to get drunk. I was drinking to die.
How a life of addiction, trauma, and incarceration turned to law school, the courtroom, and a question worth asking. Can God really redeem a life that broken?
My father was sitting on the front of the boat. My grandfather hit a sandbar, flipped my father over the front of the boat, and my grandfather actually ran over him and killed him.
Oh.
That was kind of the beginning of the end at a really, really early age because it was such a devastating accident.
We are Untrained Philosophical Discussionists, and today we're joined by author and attorney Josh Horton. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today on Untrained Philosophical Discussionists.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
So we're going to kind of go through your history here. This is going to be a two-part, two-episode discussion with you. We kind of want, because there's such big components in your life, what we'd like to do is kind of hear about your story. How did you grow up? What happened that kind of shaped your young life, and then as you got to be older, kind of led to some of the bad decision making. And then in the second episode, what we'd like to do is unpack what you do now and where your heart is led in that piece of your life. So let's start right at the beginning. Were you born in Florida?
No,
raised in Florida?
I was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1983. I was actually conceived in addiction treatment. My father was a director of maintenance at Peachford Hospital in Atlanta. My mother was in administration, so I was born in treatment, so to speak. But
no irony there.
No, not at all. God there certainly has a sense of humor. But so I was born there. My grandparents, his parents, had moved to Atlanta. Both my grandfathers were in the insurance business, and they had kind of Forrest Gumped their way into Atlanta, but they had bought some property in Panama City Beach in the late 70s, early 80s, and they'd opened up surf shops called Surf Hut in Destin and Panama City Beach. And my father, we left Atlanta when I was a baby, right after I was born, and my father was going to help my grandfather run these new shops, and do some of the property. And my mother was 22, my father was 27, and they were out fishing on the Gulf one morning.
Who's they?
My grandfather and my father. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And my father was sitting on the front of the boat looking for sandbars. I'm sure they were drinking. It was, fishing and drinking go hand in hand.
Sure.
And but my father was sitting on the front of the boat. Grandfather hit a sandbar, flipped my father over the front of the boat, and my grandfather actually ran over him and killed him.
Oh.
And the Coast Guard came out. The propeller had gotten my father in the back of the head and killed him instantly. And I think that that was kind of the beginning of the end at a really, really early age because it was such a devastating accident.
How old are you at that time?
8 weeks.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And so I never really knew my father. And my mother, she was lonely. I can remember watching her cry, listening to Hank Williams Jr., was my dad's favorite artist, and, on the old school vinyls, and she was devastated, obviously. And my family history, I like to say if you shake my family tree, liquor bottles fall out because it's just been that way for so many generations. And my mother's not really a heavy drinker, and I don't think my father was around long enough to ever really figure out if he had alcoholism or not. But certainly her side of the family is from New Orleans, grew up Catholic. Just drinking is just part of the culture. Everything is surrounded around drinking.
Sure.
And she was lonely. She had this big house and, what was the country, it's not the country anymore, but, and I think she was scared, and she brought in, roommates and my family. And I can remember just one of my, just the fighting and the drinking and the things that go along with that sort of
lifestyle.
Yeah, just, I mean, nothing good happens with alcohol. I've never seen anybody get really, really intoxicated and then wake up the next day and go, man, I'm really glad I did that. And that's
Made
just
so many good decisions.
right. But, and I could remember even as a child, I would go downstairs and they'd be, partying. I'm like 3 or 4 years old and I'm turning the lights on. I'm like, you guys got to go, like out, like it's time to go to bed, and so I literally bouncing as a little kid trying to, you don't got to go home, but you can't stay here kind of thing. The environment was just, I like to say, especially with addiction, biology loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. And I think that was certainly my case. It was in my blood from the beginning. I think I was an alcoholic before I ever took my first drink. I certainly, there was something I always just felt incomplete and like there was a hole in my soul. And, to be honest with you, my first addiction was food, right? I mean, I and I gained a lot of weight as a young child, just overeating. But so she went on. She met a man when I was about 7. She remarried, and he had substance use issues as well. And it was he's a very large man, very big, very strong, very loud. And very scary. And I just remember, but I wanted a dad so bad, right? I mean, I would go up to people when I was a baby, barely able to talk, and I would go up to just strangers at the gas station, and be like, "Hey, you want to be my dad?" And my mom's single. You want to date my mom? That kind of thing. And I just always wanted a dad. And he stepped in. I don't want to make him out to be a monster because he had his own demons and his own issues and the things that he came from that he struggled with. And I think, again, we're all just doing the best that we can.
Yeah, nothing's black and white.
No.
In this world, everything's gray. So we tend to box people into like bad, good, evil. And it's like, that's not exactly the case. Because even the most hardened criminals I've ever run into in my life have someone that they love and would treat well and would do the best they could for that person, usually a mom. So to say anybody's just bad, I think oversimplifies the complication that is this life. And then what you said there too about he had his own things. Did you ever find out what any of those things were?
He suffered from abuse. He didn't know who his father was. And you can imagine growing up in Alabama in the 60s and being from an unwed mother. I mean, that was just taboo at that time. And the stigma that comes from that and the shame and the guilt that we carry.
And we were talking about it out in the hallway. We were talking about generational curse. And biblically, Andy and I have broken this down recently on a series we did, but it's not like a hex like you'd think in voodoo. Generational curse are these things that as we're children, we see mimicked in front of us and then we copy. So if there's an absent father, you might be an absent father yourself. And we see those patterns throughout society where whatever is modeled for children, they end up doing as they get older. And that's where a lot of, to be able to, once we receive Christ and to be able to walk in forgiveness towards others that maybe hurt us, we have to kind of analyze, well, what was their background? We have to be willing in our hearts to step back into somebody else's past, even if they've been awful to us, and say, well, why were they awful? Because it's not like, I think the point is that they're not just evil and they get off on being mean. It's like, what trauma do they carry?
Exactly.
And then trying to recognize that so that we can, because, Jesus says to love your neighbor, and who's your neighbor? Your neighbor's everyone. So somehow we have to try to, and he says, love your enemies. Same thing. It's like we have to try to find a way to be compassionate even towards the worst people in a way, whatever way we can find.
Right.
And it's usually trying to identify, like, where did they get so broken here that this is the person they've become?
I agree.
With question for you, with your stepfather, when he stepped into that role, was there times where you felt loved and cared by him, or was there always like this distance you felt in between him where you were yearning for something that he wasn't capable of giving you?
Both. So he really got me involved in sports when I was 8 or 9. And I mean, I can just remember him playing baseball with me and being outside with me every day and playing catch with me. And he always worked hard. So he always showed a good work ethic. But when they had 2 more children, I can remember something just, I could tell. I was only 12 years old, but I looked, and when they were giving my brother a bath, when they brought him home from the hospital, I was like, something shifted. Like something is not the same now.
Something's being given to him and taken from you?
Well, it was a different kind of connection. Okay. And I felt that. I felt the different, and I knew, and I think because my mother loved my father so much and would probably talk.
Your father being your stepfather?
No, my real father.
Your father,
my
okay.
biological father. She would talk about that in front of my stepfather. And I think that hurt him as well with, you know, hearing that and knowing that he's gone. And then at some level, he looks at me and he's like, well, that's him. You know, like I'll never be that to her. So I think there was some sort of, you know, just this, I don't want to say jealousy, but almost like an inadequacy or something.
Yeah. How are you ever going to live up to whatever myth your mother probably built up to this man that like she had dreams for?
Right.
She had dreams to be with. They're together. They have a child. Her dream was to raise the child with this man. And then that was cut short. How do you compete against that?
Well, and that brings in back to what I kind of experienced is I think looking back now and after doing some trauma work and going back and looking at these, you know, these experiences and what really shaped a lot of the mental processes that I developed was, you know, I was always trying to live up to a ghost too. Like I could never be that guy. I could never be what she needed. I wanted to protect her. Even as a child, I wanted to make her okay. But I wasn't capable of that. And I you know, I was trying to, you know, live up to a ghost and I couldn't do it. And then, so, you know, from there, after my brother and sister were born, I kind of started moving away from that unit, and I discovered drugs and alcohol.
At what age?
I was 12 or 13. And I knew I was an alcoholic. It was the first time I I drank beer or got drunk, was with one of my best friends when I was like 13. His dad went out and bought us a 6-pack, you know, and you do it as kids, right? And I knew that something was different because my friend drank his 3 beers, got a little dizzy and went to sleep. I drank my 3 beers and I went to the liquor cabinet, got a bottle of Jack Daniels and ruined his dad's couch. Right. So what should have told me that something was really wrong there was that, you know, I woke up and instead of feeling the hangover and the sickness, I was like, oh my God, that was my first spiritual experience. That was the first time I ever felt okay in my own skin. And I was going to chase that no matter what the cost, because I wanted to feel okay.
What's interesting about that story is you knew at the end of 3 beers what to do next, which is a taught behavior, right? Most kids, like you said, your other friend, he drank his 3 and went to sleep, but there's something in you that you had seen before that knew once you got done with those 3 that there was more to the story, and you knew where to go and you knew what to do. So there was already a habit that was built into you that for a 12 or 13-year-old, you know, shouldn't already have those instincts of what to do next. When you woke up the next morning from that, like how did that, like what switch or what changed in you from that point on to create this new identity of who Josh was?
For the first time I felt okay. I felt like I was sufficient. I mean, it's and we talk about it, and I think, you know, there's a reason they call it spirits, right? I mean, and they talk about, you know, the devil is a liar, and the deception and the, you know, what we think, what feels good, what I think is fixing me is actually a destroyer. But I felt that, and I went to forward to, it became, when can I do that again? So instead of, you know, looking to other things, it was looking for that next escape. And it got exponentially worse very fast. I hit the ground running. I got my first arrest at 15 for hit and run, driving with my girlfriend around at 15 years old, and ran up in the back of a tractor trailer and then left. I mean, and so got my first DUI at 16 in Panama City Beach on spring break. And it just, I was a very smart kid too. I did very well in school up until that point. But when I discovered drugs and alcohol, that consumed my life, and I ended up dropping out of high school. I ended up getting arrested and being, a social pariah that, people did not want their kids around. They didn't want, and of course my friend circle, I hung around with people that drank like I did and that partied like I did, that made me feel more normal about what was going on.
What was home life like during that point in time? I don't want to rush through that too quickly. So, you start drinking at 13, now we're here at 18. But in those in-between times, what was life? I mean, did mom and stepdad, grandparents know that you were drinking like that?
Oh yeah. And I think they wanted to just kind of put me somewhere and get me fixed, so that you send you to rehab, and then they started calling the cops. I mean, I remember there was something, they thought it was kind of comical. I remember coming home at 15 and I'd gotten in trouble, and my birthday cake was me behind bars. Like it was some kind of joke. And I'm not sure why that was I'm still kind of confused about that, but I left home. I moved out, and I had met somebody that their mother was a Playboy photographer in Atlanta. She was actually the most shot woman in Playboy before Pamela Anderson, and moved in there. And I'm like, man, I'm in heaven. Like I have arrived, all the, booze and drugs. And now I've got naked women around me all the time. Like it doesn't get any better than this. Right. And that just took me to a deeper level. I discovered worse drugs. I discovered, more depths of depravity and just shame and guilt, because, at some level I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't know how to do anything different. And I think sometimes, I look back and I think alcoholism might have been, had I not had alcohol, I might have committed suicide, I think. So maybe, and I was talking to my therapist about this a while back, and he's like, if God is everything or he's nothing, he was in that drink too. And that might have been what saved your life, because had you not had that, you might have done something different, because it did take enough of the pain away to allow me to keep moving forward a little bit.
You've written a book, A Legal Rebel, and I've read it. And you spend the first portion of that book talking about your family and your grandfather and your grandmother and your mother, and kind of this shadow of your father who wasn't there, but kind of hung over everybody all the time. And I think so that people can maybe better understand what this brokenness was. This was an entire upbringing where there is a person that's not there. It's an elephant in the room constantly that nobody wants to talk about. So you didn't have anyone. You're saying you see a therapist now. We always promote that here, because if you have brokenness and you have trauma in your past, you should seek someone that's professional to kind of help you work through that stuff. But when you're a kid, you're looking to talk to your parents, right, or other adults around you to kind of help you figure out what this world is about and what you're supposed to do with this pain. And you were in pain. And then here's you trying to help your mom not be in pain. And that's an imbalance of, God's design there. And then in your book, you talk about how your grandfather, you talk to him, or at least attempt to, but he kind of had so much pain from that accident. And he was the one that was down here in Panama City, right?
He was, and I'll go back even a step further. After the accident, I would go and spend time with him in the summers and whatnot. And his brother was a World War II vet.
Okay.
And I can remember bringing him what I know now as Jack Daniels. I thought we were bringing him his coffee every morning.
Yeah.
And he was living with my great grandmother, but he was literally bedridden. I thought he was older than my great grandmother. Watching this guy at that young age, I'm like, oh, that's either her husband or her dad, because he looked so bad. He had crippling arthritis, and we would bring him Jack Daniels every morning. Mm-hmm. That was his medicine. And that's, and I think because addiction is so stigmatized and so taboo, it was very secretive. Like nobody talked about it. It was your issues. You stayed silent about it. And it was not something that was discussed or accepted in mainstream conversations.
Sure.
So I mean, and my grandfather was not that bad, but you could tell. And I think at some level, my grandmother, she never said it, but I think she held a resentment against him that was just kind of unspoken, and you could feel the tension between them. And he never got over that.
Well, let's validate that. I mean, you and your son went out drinking and fishing, and something bad happened, and my son's not here anymore.
Right.
Because of something
That's
he did.
really what happened. Yeah. If we can just hit it straight directly, that's it. And yeah, I've done far less and very angered my wife or very angered other women in my family by doing far less during drinking. And maybe you're familiar with some of those things too.
I'm intimately.
And having people be very hurt by the decisions you made. Now imagine someone died because of it. You know, so for you to feel that as a child, I mean, that was there.
Yeah, I think so. And at the same time, it puts such a burden on him and such just this immense guilt. He quit taking his heart medication. He bought a piece of property in Alabama that was going to be his camping hunting spot. And I think he went there to die because he ended up having a heart attack there. He was, talk about, I never really saw him drunk, but I could tell when he'd been drinking, it was just, because he would get a little happier. And he was, which is the opposite of my other grandfather. But there would be, he would get a little more lively and jovial and playful. But when that went away, it was very solemn and just you could tell. And he was tired, and I don't think he wanted to live. And he ended up having a heart attack with a hospital not even within an hour of the driving distance of where he was at. And at 15, I lost him, and that angered me too.
Of course,
because that was all I had of my dad, and it's like you left me too. So I can remember being angry at his funeral over that.
Who'd you talk to about that at that time? Anybody?
My friend that went with me, Lee, but we were drinking. I mean, I was already drinking at that point.
Sure.
And using that to medicate those emotions or numb those feelings instead of processing it. And I think, we've kind of freeze our mental and emotional growth whatever time we start using.
Yes.
So when I finally ended up getting sober, I was a kid. Like I had no emotional maturity. I had no idea how to live life. I saw one therapist one time, and he goes, and I was mad about all the arrests. And I was yelling about that. I was complaining. And if I'd have just been rehabilitated. And he goes, Josh, you were never habilitated. You got to be habilitated before you can be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
And he was right. I had to grow up at 30 years old. And it was very hard because I never went through those processes at 15 to 25.
Nobody was there to lead you through it.
And if they were, I had already gone past the point of being able to accept that at that point.
Do you feel like there was people that were that they seen you starting to spiral at a young age and stepped in and tried to be helpful, and you maybe push back on them? Was there any of that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because at that point when I had found, my best friend, which was the booze, anything that came between me and that was a threat.
Sure.
And I was not going to let anybody take my best friend away from me because that was it was my God. I mean, it really was. I had faith in that. And I grew up Southern Baptist, and I went to this, really, hardline church as a kid, and I can remember, and that was another thing that confused me about God, right? Was because I see these things, these behaviors that they're talking about are bad on Sunday, but we're doing it all week, and then we're going on Sunday, dressing up nice and pretending like everything's okay. That just felt fake to me. Sure. I didn't like that. I didn't want anything to do with that. And I tell people all the time, I would go to this, this church, and I would sit on a pew, and I drink, I pee my pants, and everybody scoot over. Well, I go to a recovery meeting. I go, when I get drunk, I pee my pants. They look over like, me too. you know, and that was the loving acceptance that I think I started, and I knew I was an alcoholic. I went to my first recovery meeting at 15 by order of the court. Yeah, but I was not, like I said, it was not going to. It couldn't deter me because I didn't have the ability to stop.
Yeah. My first recovery meeting was court ordered as well. So anytime there's a court order recovery meeting, I'm just going to show up because I'd rather do this than go to jail.
Sure.
Right. And so there's no intent in your heart whatsoever to actually want to change. You were drinking at 15. When did drugs come into play, and what drugs came into play? And, how did you even come by that?
I was like 12 or 13, and I was with my stepdad. He had started a landscaping company, and I don't know how the topic came up, but he had asked me if I smoked pot, and I was like, it wanted to sound cool. I was like, yeah, of course I have. I'll show you I'm a man. And he pulled out a thing of pot, and that was the first time I ever smoked pot. Was with him when I was about 13, and it kind of devolved from there, and started selling it and doing other things to try and supply my habit. I didn't have a job, so how am I gonna
Familiar with that?
how am I gonna get high? I got to figure out a way to get an enterprise going here, and so that became part of it, and it led to drug task force raiding houses and being turned in by confidential informants, and just all of the chaos that ensues with that, which I want to take some accountability that I can understand why my mother and wanted me out of the house at that point. What I kind of got angry at was, what about the other guy? Like, why is it all me? Like, why, I'm not the only one screwing up here. You know what I mean? And I think it was the fear. She's just so scared to be alone again. Plus she had these two small kids, and what is she going to do? And these poor babies are seeing me handcuffed on the curb with guys in SWAT gear. And I get it. Like, you don't want, what do you do at that point?
What's the age separation between you and your younger siblings?
About 12 and 13 years.
Yeah.
So, I was considerably older, and
sure.
they were innocent. They had no role or no, I understand wanting to protect them from that.
It's interesting. I don't know if you've correlated this, you probably have, but you said that when you'd go to the Baptist church that you would feel like people would show up on Sunday, they'd look a certain way and they'd present themselves a certain way, and then they'd behave a different way the rest of the week. You've actually brought that up about different family members and growing up in your household and grandfather's alcoholism and how they kind of kept that a little hidden. And then the brother looking much older, but also him kind of being hidden away. There's a lot of that's happened in your life up till then. It seems like everybody's trying to put this other image. Nothing's as bad as it seems, but everything's very broken.
and I think that's, we have a saying, you're only as sick as your secrets, because we can't. And I've done a lot of stuff, like shadow work with like Carl Jung, and talking about, integrating the shadow part of ourselves and that kind of thing with, looking at these dark places, because you're not going to, it doesn't get better until you shine light on it.
Right.
You can't fix it if you hide it. And so it's become, I believe in authenticity, and the truth will set you free. Right. I mean, that's kind of what I believe, even though it's scary and it's not comfortable to talk about these things. It's important, not just for me, but for the person that, is feeling the same way and thinks they're alone.
Yes.
Right? Because when I went to my first recovery meeting, I thought I was the only person that felt that way.
Yep.
I did not think there was anybody else out there that but when I read about what was going on and the mental obsession and the physical allergy, and I was like, they wrote this book about me, and I'm like, how do they know? How are they inside my head? And that's when I for the first time, I was like, I knew I knew what I was. So even though it was a nudge from the judge, it sparked something inside of me. It woke something up to where I knew at that point that there what I was and what was going on, and that it was a spiritual malady.
Well, I think that's a thing most addicts wrestle with. I think that's, you talked about like the devil's a liar. And so I think this is the greatest lie the devil tells people, is that you're the only one feeling this and you're the only one going through it and nobody else can resonate with your experience. But then once you start to get in recovery and actually talk to people, you find that you have very similar stories, that there's a lot of people out there that have had exactly the same experience that you have and know the feelings that you have.
We lead with that stuff here. That is why we constantly, every single episode, I talk about my alcoholism, my drug addiction. Why? Because I want the people that are actually, that know somebody, or if they are somebody, I want them to hear it from me, because the stuff that you're saying totally resonates with me. I totally understand what you're saying. And you're absolutely right. When I first was experiencing any sort of drug rehab or trying to figure out any of that stuff, I had so many dark secrets in my heart. And it was only in sharing those secrets that I started to receive any sort of freedom from them. And then other people would go, "Oh my God, I've totally been there." Or I'd hear somebody else tell their story and I would go, "Okay, all right, well, it's not just me." Because you get that obsession mentality that you're talking about. Like, praise God, my wife's never had addiction issues at all. So when I talk about some of this stuff, she doesn't get it. And I'm so grateful that she doesn't, right? I wouldn't want anybody to go through whatever that is, that mentality, that cyclical thing where all I want to do is fill that deep hole inside of me with stuff. And I can't focus on anything else. And it's so scary to be in that place. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But it was in other people telling me that they'd experienced that I realized I wasn't alone. And then seeing them on the other side of it gave me hope that maybe somehow I could be where they're at now.
Exactly.
So we have to talk about those dark places. And in fact, as we expand and we do this show, it's like I talk about all kinds of crazy stuff that I've done, because you're right. Any of those shadows in my life can be the next opportunity for the devil to get in there and twist those on me and use them against me and break, all these good things that I have going, because it is any of those little secret spaces in our hearts that do cause exposure points where the devil can take you back in. So it's so good that you talk about these things, man. I'm glad that you're sharing all this with us. Let's kind of hit up this. You're out of the house now. You were just starting to talk about moving in with somebody else that was like a photographer.
Well, the daughter that I had met, her mother was a photographer for Playboy, right? And so you can imagine the lifestyle that goes with that.
And you're completely dropped out of school at this point in time. So there's no school. You're away from your parents. You're 16. And now you're living in this house with what obviously sounds like, if I was 16, it would sound awesome.
Right.
But as an adult now looking back, it's like complete chaos. It's the antithesis of what you needed.
Right.
Let's talk about that. How did they invite you in? You're just dating this girl and they said, "Yeah, you're kicked out. Come live with us."
Pretty much.
Okay.
It was, everybody was just kind of okay with it, and
Did your parents know that you had moved into this place?
yeah, and then I went back and forth. So because obviously when you're drinking and doing drugs like that, any kind of relationship you have is going to be volatile. So, the problems would happen and I'd wind up back at the house. And by this point, my grandfather had lost everything. And so my grandfather, my uncle, who's
This
also
your dad's dad or your
mother's dad,
Okay.
had they lost everything. So everybody had now moved in with my mother. So everybody's living in the house at this point. I've got an uncle who's a severe alcoholic. He's a little bit different than me. He's now dead. He drank himself to death in a hotel room in 2014. But he would drink and curl up in a fetal position and just stay there for a couple of weeks. Just stay immobile. I was the opposite. I was going to go out and I was going, I'm the kind of drunk society's just not going to tolerate drinking. Right? Just, I want to find the action and
I'll create some.
Right. Exactly. And so that was another dynamic of, now I'm competing with, even when I got to go home, like the house is full and there's these other alcoholics there and there's this other drunk, so it was just, and it just went into, then I felt like I really didn't have a place to go. And then at 18, I had money that was set aside for a college education from my father's death. And instead of going to college or doing anything productive with the money, I went out and with the assistance of, my parents, I buy a brand new Ford Lightning. I don't know if you've seen the movie Fast and Furious, but that red truck that Paul Walker drives.
Yeah.
That was what I bought at 18 years old. And of course, what could possibly go wrong with an SVT,
At a drunk 18-year-old.
Right. So eventually I wrapped that around a tree at 90 miles an hour in a neighborhood and just left it. I just walked away from it and never picked it up because I knew if I went to go pick the truck up, I was getting arrested and it was gone. And I used the rest of the money to try and live on and feed these, survive and feed my addictions. Right. So I squandered all of that money. And honestly, by the time I was 21 years old, I had to file bankruptcy. And, that was another level of, just
By the time
failure.
you've talked about in your book too about the number of times you've been arrested. So talk
Is
us through
that
that a little
happening
bit.
through this cycle
Oh,
too?
yeah.
As you're just going to jail and then you're getting out?
Correct. And I'm on one probation, then I got to satisfy this probation, stay out of that probation. Then I'm doing I'll violate because I get
County 1, County 2,
right,
County 3.
Right. I'm doing a stint here, doing a stint there, trying to, rob Peter to pay Paul and, staying accountable to people, going to, I started out in really fancy treatment centers. And then by the end I was in,
Mental institution.
not even that. It was an old chicken slaughterhouse they had converted in Gainesville, Georgia, and there was no running water. But it was the probation office accepted the fact that I could go there. So I ended up in really, really nasty places, and that was just. But even with that, I wasn't going to stop drinking.
How many times did you get arrested?
Best I can recollect, about 27 or 28.
And did you ever do any real jail time?
I did about 6 months in Cherokee County. I took a DUI to jury trial, and I really wasn't driving. I was sitting in my truck, drunk, and the cops pulled up. I threw the keys out of the car. I'd been through this enough times to know, get rid of the keys, not have anything. They still arrest me for DUI. I took it to jury trial, and they added a count of public drunk. Well, the jury didn't ever know my record, but the judge did. And they found me not guilty of DUI, but guilty of public drunk. And the judge threw the book at me. He maxed me out. Like he goes, 6 months is the most you can give for a city ordinance offense. And he was like, you're getting 6 months in jail. Have fun. And that was one of the worst experiences of my life because he gave me a week to go get my affairs in order. And by affairs in order, I went and ate 60 Xanax and drank 2 gallons of vodka and turned myself in. And that almost killed me.
Yeah, you talk about delirium tremens, the DTs.
That was my first experience with that. I didn't understand that the benzodiazepines and alcohol are really the only things that'll kill you coming off of it.
Yep.
And I went through hallucinations in jail, right? And I thought I was somewhere else. I attacked people, and they honestly, they beat me to a pulp and wouldn't take me to the hospital because they didn't want to see them to see what they'd done to me. So they threw me in the hole, and no toilet, butt naked, 3 days. I'm literally hearing and seeing. I think I'm in some POW camp, and they tell my family and my attorney, we don't think he's going to make it, right? And so I just shook that out. That was probably one of the worst experiences of my life as far as the jail goes. That's.
So you spent 3 days in the hole going through DTs where you should have been in a hospital.
Probably, yeah.
Right. So you're there. So you come out of that experience 3 days later, you wake up realizing where you are. What happened there?
When I went to turn myself in, I brought my Xanax prescription. I told them that I was supposed to get this every 3 hours. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. They put it in my property. So when I finally get out, before I'm even out of the jail, I'm eating a Xanax.
Are you eating it because you feel like you're stressed, or are you eating it just to get a buzz again?
I didn't want to feel anything. I didn't want to feel any emotions. I didn't want to feel any, and I think anger is there's a lot of anger in my story too. I mean, I think I was angry at God for a long time for taking my father. I was angry at the world. I was, I just felt so misunderstood. And I think some of it was defiance. I think some of it was just, I'll show you, I'll hurt me. And that, it's very self-destructive behaviors. And I think it's really just suicide on the installment plan.
Yep.
Is all it is.
In these jailhouse experiences, in these rehab stints, is anything clicking besides, yes, I realize that I have an issue here, but the rebellion in you is just like, I don't care? Or are there any moments where you go, I sure would like to live different than I've been living?
There were, although short-lived, because it would, as soon as something would happen, some sort of calamity or something that I didn't have the emotional maturity to deal with,
right,
I would go back to the.
I'm so familiar with that. That's why I ask.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has that, man. I think anyone that is like us, that has these addictions, that's had them, it's like, and I'm wondering if you've ever felt this way, but I would be so miserable in my drinking and drugging. And then I would be like, all right, once this stuff is gone, I'm going to change.
Yeah.
Once I'm done with that bottle of booze and I get rid of these pills and I snort that stuff right there. But once it's all gone, I'm going to quit. I'm going to get my life in order because this clearly isn't working. And by the way, I'm out of money now. So that's the last of my money's in these drugs. Right. So when it's gone, but then when it was gone, man, I'd find another way. And I just keep doing it because getting back to any of the introduction to any of that sickness, because I had the DTs as well. So anytime I'd even start coming off of stuff and I'd start getting sick, it wasn't a question of like, how long is this going to take? It was how quickly can I get something else to get me away from how bad this is about to feel, especially after the first time ever experiencing that. It's so scary when you have full-on auditory and visual hallucinations because it's so confusing.
It is.
What is really happening here? You don't feel like yourself. You can't track thoughts. You can't communicate properly. If like yourself, if you're having these violent outbursts because you're scared, and then the people that are in authority just, they're not compassionate. They don't care. So they throw you in a hole. Or if you go to we talked about this in the hallway, but it's like, if you go to the hospital, they're not happy to see that you're trying to get better, or they don't care that your addiction is the number one leading thing, and there's just not a lot of compassion in these spaces.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because it's probably the number one criminal justice issue and the number one healthcare issue in the country. But you get a 6-hour, certification in medical school, and we didn't even talk about it in law school. So, go figure. And they wonder why the problem continues to get worse because people aren't taught that. It's different from cancer. Somebody gets cancer and they go into the hospital. Everybody feels sorry for them. Somebody has addiction. They're literally dying from the addiction. They look at it as a moral failing and a personal choice, and you did it to yourself.
Well, and this is why I want to point out and confirm with you, you were having those issues from time to time where you'd go, man, my life sucks. I don't want to live this way. I don't want to take these things, but there's nothing else. Nobody else is reaching me with anything that works. This actually works to take away the trauma inside. It makes it so I don't have to think about all these things all the time. And it makes me feel okay with myself for just a brief moment. And because there's no other offering that matches that anywhere, it's like, well, this is what I'm going to do then. But there are those times, right? You hit those times where you're like, I just want to stop and I just can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to get rid of the feelings of inadequacy, right? Because I know that I should be better than where I'm at, or I should be in a different place in my life than where I'm at, but I'm stuck here. And so this is the way I'm just going to numb the feeling of that, because I know that I have potential. I mean, you said it yourself. You were a smart guy, right? You could have been doing more with your life. And I think there's this inner part of us that always knows that I should be doing more with my life, but because I'm not, then I'm just going to fill it with this addiction. So that way I don't even have to think about it.
And then you get the shame and the guilt from not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you condemn yourself for not being good enough.
And you're condemned by those around you too, by the way. I mean, and it's like the people that are living the same pattern in life that you are the ones doing the condemning as well. So it's like the place where the one place I should feel sanctuary is my home. You didn't have that because there's a bunch of alcoholics that were living there too. So your fight or flight, like that parasympathetic nervous system part of your body is just always on. You never have a point in time in your life where you actually get to shut that off.
There's no place of peace.
And I think that's where so many people find themselves, is like the one place I should be able to go that there's peace and I can find just a moment just to come down. You don't have that. So it's no wonder that you just stay stuck in that like cyclical thing of drugs and alcohol, just trying to.
And it creates this hypervigilance. And,
Yep.
then you're constantly looking for threats. And I mean, I totally get that. And then, but as men, I think especially, we're looked at as weak because we're not able to handle our liquor.
You can't just stop?
Right. You must
Just say no. What's so hard about that?
You must be.
Can't you see how bad it's getting for you? Why don't you just quit?
Right. Just stop.
Gosh.
Gosh, I never thought about
Thanks.
that.
Right.
Thanks for that help there.
And then you're going to these places of authority, whether it's jail or whether it's the hospital, and they're doing the same thing that, like, I'll just say this, my ignorant family would say. Why don't you just stop doing it for a while?
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Yeah.
And they would say the same thing in the hospital, and they'd say the same thing in any of the institutions.
And unfortunately, people chase that to death. They
Clearly. 100,000 people last year died of fentanyl alone, I believe, let alone all the other drugs that are out there.
It took my best friend in 2013. His two little girls found him. His name was John, and he had never done intravenous drugs. He couldn't get any pain pills, and somebody suggested that he try injecting heroin, and he had no idea what he was doing. Got a bad shot, and it killed him. And his two little girls found him in the morning and got their suitcases and went and sat on the curb because they didn't know. They're like 2 and 3 years old.
Jeez.
And it's things like that just stick in my mind. And it should have been me so many times. It's like I feel like if I'm not doing something for those people that didn't get the opportunity, I'm not doing the right thing.
Yeah, 2013, my best friend drank himself to death. He was schizophrenic, had a drug problem, but also had an alcohol problem. And I had to distance myself from him because he would just call me, he'd call my wife and harass us. And had no recollection of any of it. So I had to distance myself from him. Then I get a call from his brother that he's in the hospital. They found 300, 1 liter empty vodka bottles in his house. And the last time I got to see him was just all of his organs shutting down in the hospital. Right? You don't forget.
How old was he?
He was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So he had been 35 years old. Yeah.
Holy
About how John was. He was early 30s.
My God.
So you have those experiences that we remember, and it's the same thing. It's, people look at him, well, why don't you just stop? You don't think that if I could, that I would. Right. And I think that's anybody that's outside of the addiction world doesn't get that part, just how that part of our brain works, why we continue to go to this thing. You don't think that we don't hate ourselves more than you do.
Right.
You don't think that I carry around that I'm a piece of more than anybody else does. Like I have to look myself in the mirror every morning and
know what I'm capable of.
Yeah. And come to terms with what I've done with my life and where I'm going with my life. Like that. And so that's the part of the addiction world, I think, where people don't understand that if you're outside of it, you don't get it. And that's why I think when you put 3 guys together who know these roads, we know this language, like we feel those feelings. And I think that's even more so why when God comes in and does what he does, why we're all the more gracious to a loving Father for stepping in and doing something for us that I don't deserve.
No.
So let's move in that direction. Let's talk about when things started to change for you.
I don't know where it came from. I think looking back, it had to be God because I didn't have this thought. But I look at my grandma and I'm like, can I go to Mississippi? And I asked her because her parents are from Mississippi. And they had this old house that was abandoned there next to a community college. And that was really because I had dropped out of school, I hadn't destroyed my GPA or anything. I took the GED drunk and got off the charts scores. Like, I mean, I don't understand. I knew that I had this ability, but it was the only thing I hadn't squandered. My criminal record was done. My driving record's done. I burned through all the money, and now I'm a bankrupt I've got a bankruptcy on my record, but I hadn't screwed school up. And so I asked her if I could go to Mississippi and try going to this community college. And I think that's really when everything started to change. And I like to say that there are no coincidences, just miracles where God chooses to remain anonymous, right? Yeah. And I'm in this town of 3,000 people. There's literally one recovery meeting in the entire county, and it just happens to be in the church behind the house that I'm living in. And I see these guys, and I'd been around long enough to know there's guys outside smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. I know what's going on.
Sure.
And so I started school, and I end up doing really well. Everything started to blossom. I went to, community college. I ended up getting a full scholarship to Ole Miss, on a lucky day scholarship that was for hard cases, that type people. And I listened to this guy he was talking about the law, and he was talking about virtue and justice and the intersection of the two, and how to, properly apply principles in the law. And he just talked about these lofty ideals that I really wanted to believe in. I really that spoke to me. And because of my own interactions with the justice system, I'm like, well, I want to be a lawyer. They said, you can apply to law school, but you'll never be a lawyer. Not with your record. No bar's going to let you in. And I decided to do it anyway. And ironically, I ended up interning for that federal judge in Oxford that had spoke at that community college about the law and virtue. And it's weird how these things come full circle. I started a nonprofit while I was there called Southern Recovery Advocacy that was to reintegrate people from jail or treatment centers back into the community, because I think there's a real disconnect there. And we had some success with that. I sponsored a young man named Rivers there, and he was 21, great looking kid. His father was top 2 guy in law enforcement in the state of Mississippi, and he had gotten his 3rd DUI. And instead of facing the consequences of that, he chose to put a rifle in his mouth. And that was really hard for me. But it springboarded this it made me want to do something to change what was going on. Recovery, everything good that has happened to me has been a direct result of recovery in God and the grace that I've been shown.
So let's talk about that. Where did God enter in all this? I don't want to jump into the timeline yet of all the legal work that you do. I want to save that part. Where did God where did your faith, where did you meet Jesus? Where did that intersect in all of this?
In the book, it kind of talks about it as this migration. It wasn't a quick thing. It wasn't an overnight, wow, look at me, I'm a Jesus freak. It was this slow kind of reckoning and recognizing.
The idea of being in recovery, I think, God gave me recovery, but recovery gave me back to God.
Right.
And it's just the interchangeableness of that. And nobody told me what to believe. Nobody said, you got to do this a certain way. That was very, just come back tomorrow. We'll do these things and you figure it out. Do these actions and you'll be contacted, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that was, I think God came in through the back door.
Well, it almost have to feel like it would be that way, because your experience growing up in the Southern Baptist Church was probably highly legalistic, because it was in the Southern Baptist Church, you don't drink. That's a no-no.
Yeah, we got a joke in Georgia. We say, how do you know the difference between a Methodist and a Baptist? Methodists say hello to you in the liquor store.
I've heard that joke before. It's a great joke.
Yeah.
But so your experience around church has been around a highly legalistic, follow these rules, and you're okay then.
Well, I call it hypocristian too. Right?
Yeah, sure.
You're doing these things. You're living one way, but you're condemning others for living the way you are. Mm-hmm. It was very again inauthentic. I think the church is supposed to be a hospital. It's not a social. In the Deep South, it's first 3 questions: what do you do? What's your last name? What church do you go to? Mm-hmm. It's a social.
Very much so.
And I didn't like that. That was not what God was to me. I felt like it was a lie. And so I think there was a lot of disdain there. So overcoming that, my own prejudices
Right.
about that, my own biases from my own experience was really difficult. And it took a man in Atlanta who I had known since I was a little kid. He actually sponsored my uncle before he died, to reintroduce me to that and show me what a Christ-like man was, and to hard to talk about, but just to really exemplify what a man really is, and the what a fatherly figure, which is ultimately God, right? Is this the ultimate father, and what that love really means.
Yeah.
And so like I said, it's been a process. It hasn't been an overnight thing, and I think it'll probably change more.
It's tough to know the love of a heavenly father if you don't know the love of an earthly father.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the example that our Father on earth is supposed to set for us, right? And if you don't have that example, it's hard to understand it, but it's also hard to feel worthy of it. And I think that's where so many of us that are addicts have wrestled with this, is like, I'm not worthy for a heavenly father to love me. Don't you just see all the mistakes I've made and the poor choices I've made? And so it's very hard for us to feel love or even to recognize what it is. And so then when another man steps in, it's why you get emotional, because somebody stepped in and loved you the way that a father is supposed to love you. And you just don't feel worthy of it, man. And you are worthy of it. I think that's the hardest part for us to get to, is just understand that all the poor choices that we've made, there's nothing that should tell us that God would ever want to redeem us. And yet he does.
Yeah. I couldn't wrap my mind around grace. I really couldn't. Because I was like, it's just, that's not the way my mind was worked. I call it spiritual jujitsu, right? Like, it's just surrender to win, give to receive type of
Pay
things.
to play.
Yeah. And I think Jesus was the ultimate spiritual jujitsu, right? Like, he came, they expected him to, be a leader of an army and conquer the world. And he did it through the ultimate surrender, and he conquered the world that way. So it's the way God works is just not the way my mind works. And trying to understand that is really difficult.
Yeah, because you feel like you have to earn it.
Right.
And that's what we do with especially if you don't have a father figure there. It's like, I always feel like I've got to try to earn it. So if I just do enough, that you'll see me for what I am, or you'll love me maybe if I just do enough. And then it never works out that way. So then once you finally fully understand grace and the love of a father, it's just like this humbling, like just almost cripples you in that moment. But it's what allows us to truly live after that too.
It's true. And I think one of the biggest things because I never really felt unconditional love.
Sure.
And I got my dog when I was in school at Ole Miss, and she's old now, but she was the first time I ever felt unconditional love. And I know that sounds weird, but
It does not sound weird to me, buddy.
It was the first
Bruno.
time. Yeah. And
Bruno's my dog. I'm with you.
And Athena has just been, she showed me what that was like. The guy I was working with in Oxford, Tim, I mean, this guy I was watching what he was doing in his life with his stepson, and the way he was raising that kid, and the discipline and the love that he was, not a harsh discipline, a loving discipline, right? And this idea of being soft. I had a boss one time that told me the best fathers have a little bit of mother in them. And I couldn't understand that either, because it was like, I come from this place where we got to be hard and tough, and really tough people are vulnerable, and he taught me that. And there's the strength, and it's a weird, like I said, it's that jujitsu, like it just the strength that comes out of the vulnerability is just, it's paradoxical, but it works.
Yes, it does.
And I can't explain that.
When do you think in your walk it became from maybe more of this ethereal God of your understanding to more of there's substance here. I can grab onto this thing. I can depend on this thing. What was that transition like?
That's a great question.
Well, first, the God of my understanding is beyond my understanding. I've just kind of given up trying to figure that out. Sure. But the process we go through in recovery to take a really hard look at what's going on and rip those wounds open and delve into that stuff. I think it's systematic ego deflation to get enough of me out of the way so that God can come in.
Yes.
And that, I think, gave me the ability to have these successes and show me a little bit of humility. Instead of having to be humiliated all the time, I could choose to be humble. I could choose to say, yes, I was wrong. Yes, I can take accountability for these things. Instead of trying to hide them, accept them, and move forward. Like, what do you do now? And after doing that for a little while, I could look back, because at first I just, the guy told me that he was helping me get sober. He'd been shot in the face. He'd done 10 years in prison for armed robbery, but he had things I didn't have. He had a family and a driver's license and, like stuff I couldn't get. And I'm like, he was, Josh, you don't have to believe. He goes, just believe that I believe. And that was enough for me in the beginning, was to believe that.
What a great statement.
But when I could look back in my own life and I could see it really happening for me, that's when it became tangible.
Yeah.
And I could see those results and I knew it wasn't me.
Yes.
And then it's amazing, like the switch here of how my weaknesses now become my strengths.
Yeah.
Right? Those old things, those old lies, all that crummy stuff that I used to believe about myself, Jesus comes in and flips it upside down and says, I'm more than enough. And now I get to lean on those things, those past mistakes that I make. And that's the reason why the strength that I have going forward now.
And it's so important, too, to recognize exactly what you just said. Because I think this is such a struggle for whether you've had addiction or not, for just Christians, for just non-believers. I don't know anybody that I've had a personal conversation with, a personal relationship with, that instantly flipped into this full-on hardcore believer and everything was perfect and everything was working great. It is this thing. It's an experiential thing. That's why Paul calls it this marathon of your life. It's like it takes a little time away from these things to look back and see all these places where God was showing up. And that's how you start building the comfortability where you can go, oh, God is trustworthy. I can actually trust him and I can trust him with these things. But it takes time to build any of that. You don't instantly go 0 to 100. I'm a full believer and I'm just going to rely on the Lord, take the wheel. Like, that's absurd. It is this migration towards that. It is seeing his grace in your life and being able to separate yourself from it. It's also that ruthless vulnerability that breaks down the ego, that affords you this opportunity to look back and see all these places where it wasn't you being badass and awesome. It was God stepping in and saving you from yourself.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love that piece, man, because it's like, that's not just an addict thing. That's like all the guys that I know that have deepened their faith walk with Christ, myself included. It's like, I look back at all the ways that he's been so amazing to me, and that he's shaped and molded my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I know that I can then put my trust in him for future things. That's the strengthening there. That's the tension that like you face when it's early in this relationship, because you're not sure how much you can trust God, especially when you come from a fatherless home like I did. It's like my example, like Andy's saying here, my dad, who was supposed to be there and show me things, wasn't. So then it's like, how do I even trust this God who loves me and wants good things for me? Why did he give me this crappy dad and this crappy life for so long then? And it's reconciling that a lot of that is like, you said it with your stepfather and you said it multiple other times, but it's like these people had trauma in their life and that was their brokenness. And God wasn't punishing me back then. He was there for me when I actually reflect on it so many times in my youth to protect me from other dangerous things and to guide me into a place that, yes, I still used drugs and alcohol for a long time, but ultimately he saved me from the worst ends of it because I'm here right now when many other people around me aren't.
And it's weird. I think it's a shift of perception. What I used to perceive as punishment, I now look at it as like sanctification. Like it is... It's so not good. Punishment. It is God reshaping me through loving discipline with these spiritual laws. Like I can't. It's like gravity. Like I know that I can't see gravity, but I know if I jump off this roof, it's going to be bad. I'm going to hit the ground really hard.
Yes.
And I have to. Unfortunately, I'm just stubborn and thick-headed, and I had to have it beaten into me but God, for some reason, He let me survive all of it, and my job is to figure out why. Like, what am I supposed to do?
And now you're doing the why. Now you're doing the why. And especially as we get into this next piece, as we move to the next episode and talk about the work that you're doing now and some of these things that you've recognized through your work, this is the why. It's like God saved me because He had greater plans beyond just a drug addict, alcoholic loser who was on a path to death. He said, no. These things are happening to you because in the future, you're going to be able to hopefully help other people become free from this.
Yep.
And the work that you're doing, I'm excited. Please, guys, we're going to have Josh in our next episode as well. We're going to talk about his law work, some of the things he's actually seen in recovery, in these recovery organizations, some of the things that are very problematic for our society. The imbalance between people of authority and people with money and power, and then us regular folks on the streets, and the way there are these tiered justice systems. So anything else you want to add to your personal story before we...
I do. I think
Please.
that I wish I could tell you that I got sober and everything was peaches and cream from 2013 on.
Sure.
Or 2012, whatever on. But I had a relapse in 2021.
Okay.
COVID hit. I think, I came down to South Florida and my ego crept back in. I started thinking, now you've got these things, you've got a law degree, you've got these, you're going to, and I traded in helping individuals for trying to change the entire system. Like, it was my ego saying, you can go tackle this thing at such a high level. And I quit doing the small things. I quit doing the day-to-day practices mix. And it was just a perfect storm. I had, COVID hit, which I'm a creature of habit. I like my routines. I'd like to do things a certain way. It disrupted my recovery routines. I was fired by a job that I felt betrayed on. I was cheated on, and then I found out that the one thing I wanted, to be a father, was not going to happen. Like, I was told that I was not going to be able to naturally conceive children, and that shattered me on a level I don't think and I chose to pick up a drink. And at this time, though, I wasn't drinking to get drunk. I was drinking to die. And I had gone to a Costco and picked up enough liquor to kill me. I put dog food in enough dog food where they would find me before she ran out of food. I mean, I'd planned this out. And after that relapse, it shattered me. And then the betrayal I felt like I had committed against God because I felt like I slapped Him in the face, right? I had been given all these gifts, and I spent years in isolation, struggling with, shame at a level that I had never felt before, because I had seen the fruit. I'd seen what could happen. I got arrested in my car for passing out drunk. And they gave me a DUI, and they took my driver's license for life based on stuff that happened 25 years ago. And so these things that have happened, it took me years, and it was the guy I told you about in Atlanta came down, and he goes, I isolated for years. I got into a prescription medication that I thought was going to help me with my job. I started abusing that. And then he calls me and he goes, I'll come down there for your birthday, but only if you go with me to some places in person. And because I had just been trying to do things online and, hide and, just, you want to talk about it, shame and embarrassment. Like I'm supposed to be, and I felt like a fraud is what I felt like.
Sure.
And,
how long did this last?
Oh God, from probably 21, I think, until last summer. I wasn't drinking, but I was not sober, and I was not active in my recovery. I was not doing things that I was supposed to be doing. And he came down last summer, and, but all this time, and I look back, but God was protecting me the entire time. Like I started a law firm. With COVID happening, I no longer needed a driver's license because I could do everything online. I was able to go to court cases. I was able to do things via remote access. And I was able to create a law firm helping people with, I started with $250 in my bank account. and I was able to do things. I was able to, sit down, and I don't know if it was God telling me, you got to be still. And he just took everything away from me. And I was forced to be still. And the guy from Atlanta said, why don't you tell your story? Why don't you talk about these things and go see who you can help with this stuff? And I think, that was what gave me the inspiration to write the book, because, my life hasn't been perfect, and it hasn't been like, I'd love to tell you that I got sober and I stayed sober and everything was great and I never suffered.
That's not real, man.
Right. And
that's not real.
Yeah.
That's just so not real. Everything's just peaches and cream now. No. We all still struggle. That's the point. This is not our home. We weren't made for this place. So we're always going to struggle against that sinful nature in ourselves, whether it's alcohol again or drugs again.
Money.
Or it's money,
Women,
or it's pornography.
Right, exactly.
Or it's anything, man.
Anger, lust,
Anger, please,
fear,
anger.
worry, anxiety.
Depression. I mean, it's all these things. I don't know. And I think it forced me to take a look at things that I didn't look at the first time.
Yep.
It broke me, but it also drove me to a level of surrender that I had nowhere else to go. I was either going to end or I was going to go deeper into God. And I chose God.
Yes.
Well, that's the whole thing about recovery too, though, right? Like if you just choose recovery only, like it's white knuckling it. I'm on my own. I'm gonna walk these steps. But when we choose God, then we get to choose the surrender part, and it's the surrender part where people find freedom, right? And so I find it very hard when people just choose recovery only.
I think recovery is not the word. I think the word you're looking for is like sobriety.
Sobriety. Thank you.
Recovery's something else.
Yeah.
But like this, I'm just going to be sober now.
Right. And I can just hold on to that for just so long. And then at one point in time, we hit a hard point, and now we have to make this choice of what am I going to do with my life? And unfortunately, this is where people lose their sobriety because they don't have this God that they've surrendered their life to. Because the thing we think about faith is, we just put a video out on this, that when we look at faith as that's going to come with ease now. But that's not what faith is. Faith is going to come with hard times now. And so when it comes with hard times, my faith doesn't disappear. It's like God gives me this peace that surpasses all understanding, as the Bible talks about. So I'm peaceful now in these hard times when I shouldn't be. But because I've surrendered my life to Christ, I'm not perfect, but I'm faithful.
Which again is the recovery piece. So that actually is closer tied into this Christ-centered walk that we have now. He's helping me through this recovery process to be able to like identify these root things that are wrong with me. My drinking was a byproduct of all these things inside of me that are all messed up.
That's right.
These dysfunctions and this stuff that people mirrored in front of me that was not the way to live, that I adapted into my life.
Yeah.
And God's pointing all those little things out now too. Like you said, with the anger thing, it's like we've talked about that so many times here, but it's always worth pointing out because like every man, we've just interviewed over a half dozen pastors. They all talk about anger too. Because it's like we as men, and maybe women do too, I don't pretend to know women's minds, but as men, we struggle with anger. And that's one of those big things that can just, it's our anger and it's the way that we go about manifesting our anger that causes shame, that then can cause these downward spirals of drinking and drugging because we don't want to deal with the repercussions of what our anger has caused.
Right. And when I found out that anger was a secondary emotion,
Right.
that it's really fear. I'm scared.
Sir.
So
Yes, sir.
it manifests as anger.
Yes.
That's where I got to get to.
Yeah, because
what am I
man.
afraid?
I'm a man. I don't want to talk about fear.
Right.
I'm not. Men aren't scared. So I'm just going to pose this anger to you instead, because that's my identity. Because that's really what we're talking about at the end of the day here. This is an identity issue that I have. So I'm either going to identify myself as a man of the world, in which case I have to be bravado because I can't be scared, or I can identify with Christ in humility, which is just power restrained.
And it's the exact Christ that you just described there too. He didn't come as a military general to conquer the earth. He came as a humble servant
and laid down his life.
It's like, that's who I'm supposed to be mimicking here. And it doesn't mean that he wasn't powerful. See, because humility is power restrained. If I'm not strong, I can't be humble. I'm weak. But actually, the stronger I become, the more humble I should be becoming too, because that's how much power I'm able to now hold back from overreacting, from getting angry and lashing out, from doing any of those negative things that's going to hurt the people around me that actually I'm trying to rescue with a relationship with Christ.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the last thing I'll point out is I figured out, not only do I need God in my recovery, I need you. I need you guys. Because I heard this poem one time that said, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul eluded me. I sought my brother and I found all three. And that, this is as much as it's a biopsychosocial issue. Like, I've got to have you guys to help me because it's God with skin on.
Couldn't agree more.
I go and I hear you guys talk, and you say something that might save my life. Maybe not today, but I'll remember it when something comes up, and because you said that, you may save my life. And if I don't have that connection, and you remind me, I need that. And I was trying to do it alone for so long.
That's it.
I can't do it by myself.
Nope. You weren't supposed to do it by yourself, man.
Well, that's why he invented the church. And it's not, and let's not get this confused with the building. It's the group of Christ followers. That's your church. My brothers in Christ. And we are supposed to be a community. We are supposed to carry each other's burdens. You're totally right, man. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We are Untrained Philosophical Discussionists. We got a website, www.updpodcast.com. You can go there, check out all the videos. You can get some merch there if you want. We got a Patreon. If you get value from our content, go become a Patreon member, please. It doesn't even cost anything. There's a ton of videos there, but we always encourage you, if you do get value, please consider becoming a paid member. Starts at just $5 a month. Please consider doing that. We're on all the platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. But if you're a worker like we are, and sometimes you can't watch our videos on YouTube, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So check us out there too. Andy, anything else you want to let folks know
No, Josh,
about?
thanks for getting to the depths of your story there. I know that God is going to use this for the heart change of a lot of people. And we just look forward to seeing what God is going to do with the next steps of your life too, man. So appreciate you being vulnerable.
And if you're someone out there who's struggling with drugs or alcohol and you don't know what to do, you don't know where to turn, please feel free to email us, updpodcast@gmail.com. We want to get in the mud. We want to pray with you. We want to try to be helpful in any way we can. We have sources. I went through recovery programs. I know a thing or two about how to get you started there. So don't hesitate. You don't have to feel these things we've been talking about for this last hour. You do not have to be alone in this fight. We want to join with you. So please hit us up there. We don't even know who you are at that point in time. You can just do it anonymously. But we will help communicate with you, and prayer's action. We want to pray with you and help you get away from this thing. So please do that. Besides that, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Again, UPD, Johnny Hansen, Andy Lamb, Josh Horton. Josh, thank you so much. We just want to pray that you have a deep and a fulfilling relationship with Jesus, and that he blesses you all the days of your life.
What all God's people said.
He said amen.
Amen.